still morning, just barely. We're glad to have you all here, both in person and Reson. He is from the Masai Mara Wildlife Conservancies Association. He is the Chief Programs Officer and member of the Senior Management Team at the Masai Mara Wildlife Conservation Association, evaluation of effectiveness, while helping to promote and diversify funding through effective resource stewardship. His portfolio includes governance, natural resource management, education, and enterprise. Before joining the MMWCA, Reson worked as a landscape ecologist for the African Foundation Wildlife, lions, rhinos, wild dogs, and reticulated giraffes. He is an active researcher with ongoing studies on determining annual vulture mortality in southern Kenya, and he is also currently enrolled as a PhD student at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So if you all give him a warm welcome, we'll get him up here to speak. Thank you.
I hope you loud. I don't know what to. Is that better? Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I am so proud to be associated with this university. I got an opportunity to come here in 2010, finished my master's in 2012, and went back to Kenya. I remember I was with my PhD. I then did discuss Dr. Bill Bauman, who was a professor here but moved to the University of Maryland. And they wanted me to stay here and continue the PhD. But I did a bit of negotiation with him to tell him that sorry, Ellen lost back in Kenya that required our urgent attention, which is what I'm going to present to you from then to today. I will not be speaking as a researcher. I will actually be speaking as a practitioner. Sometimes a bit of disconnect, sometimes a bit of, unrealistic stuff and all that. But I want to speak from a perspective of most of the things that I'll be talking about practical things that we are confronting with. And I will also be talking about one of my favorite landscape, the Masai Mara landscape. Now basically a great colleague there because he visits and we try to design program. Fortunate to come with Mama here, Jenny is part of family. The one who hosted me when I was here in Clemson and supported me a lot. Connect with them again. So when we talk about the Masai Mara, basically it's actually been named as an 8th wonder of the world. And what you see there is a picture that that's how you will view the Mara. But basically, What you can see here, a community protected national reserve begins from that escarpment, the highest peak of the escarpment. That's where you begin Masai Mara National Reserve. But what is here by community members to establish protected areas to conserve wildlife. And so basically, this area has assemblages of reserve. But the reason this particular area is critical is because it's about 0.05% of the total country's land, but it hosts nearly 30% of Kenya's wildlife. It's very significant in terms of biodiversity. It's a very, very significant area. And that's one of the reason it's very, very small ecosystem, but it holds a lot in terms of biodiversity reaching in the entire region. Yeah, but so many species. And of course, one of the biggest is the wildebeest, which we have nearly about 1.5 million, although the number keeps on going down. That number of species has so many challenges that I will talk a little bit about later. But basically, we have the migration. Made this particular landscape become a critical landscape. And of course, a lot of people have visited, you must have seen in National Geographic, the wildebeest crossing the river, and a lot of them drop is basically just the lifeline of this particular ecosystem. This is the only river that we have. It comes also around water abstraction, a lot of challenges on climate change where drought happens and this river almost to become empty, and it's the only main source of water for this particular landscape. For the Masai Mara National Reserve, the river meanders goes into through the conservancies to Masai Mara National Reserve. I'll be able to show you. It depends on this river, then goes all the way down to Lake Victoria. And I'm sure most of you might be good. It's the main source of the Nile. So you can basically see the ecological significance of this particular area, not just ecological, but mainly depend on the Nile, which draws most of its water from Lake Victoria. And this is one of the sources of water for Lake Victoria. So that's one of the 0.5 million or nearly 2 million ungulates crossing or utilizing this ecosystem cannot be stabilized by predators alone. So what happened wildebeest? 100,000 wildebeest that drown as a result of this river. And basically, it's an ecological significance because it is this river that sustains those numbers. And lions and hyenas will not be able to kill that number of wildebeest or ungulates. So basically, this river plays a critical ecological. These 100,000 wildebeest drowning every year. Studies, if you just do your quick mathematics, that's about 29 million kilos of meat every year in the ecosystem. So it's that ecosystem. So basically, my study on vultures is basically because of a health challenge that we are staring. So these carcasses, the meat, the 29 million kilos of meat, has been determined of those carcasses are cleared by vultures. Vultures, we have 8 species in Kenya. In the Mara region, we have 6 that utilize the Mara set. So you can be looking at those kinds of carcasses, and something that clears up to 70% of those carcasses have, as I studied vultures and looking at what is happening, then sometimes it begs a question that how long do we monitor without swinging into action? Because, for example, if I was going to be able to save these vultures and save this particular landscape, then it will be meaningless to continue to monitor. We can monitor, and a lot of research extinction, but you need to monitor and think about, now that we know the problem, what do we need to do so that efforts are equivalent, efforts of monitoring and to action. And so basically for me, we began to think about, so what do we need to do so that the system is stable? And so we started working with communities, but I'll talk about that. So what else is there? I'm sure Professor Larry, when he was there, he must have seen we have about between 50 to 60 individual cheetahs. Cheetahs do not in that particular landscape, but it's facing a lot of challenges. And one of the challenges is, one of the biggest challenges is human beings. We were just discussing with Larry here, one of the problems that is facing our cheetahs is harassment by tourists, by vehicles, by fraud, because it's a mass tourism destination. So this particular cat, although it's very, very successful, it has over 70% hunting success rate, but normally it doesn't have the opportunity to utilize that skill for the cubs and even for herself or himself because of harassment. And so, and this is another different, because cheetahs are not they don't move in prides, and they don't have those big social ties like lions would. And so there is a lot of parental investment that goes into a cheetah just raising cubs. And so the particular population is quite low compared to other cats. And because of all those challenges, they kill, they have so many competitors and kills from them. And it becomes very, very difficult for this species to survive. And so, and we have it in the Mara. So it's a critical area that requires a lot of attention so that species. Yeah, of course, then we have the Jimbos, which is the elephants. We are the leading landscape in Kenya in terms of elephant numbers. This particular landscape have nearly about between 2,600 to 3,000 elephants at every given time. And so that's a substantial population of elephants. Nearly about between 40 to 50 different prides utilizing the Mara. I'm just talking about the Mara. I'm not talking about the Serengeti, which is 10 times bigger than the Mara. The Mara for its survival. Otherwise, without Serengeti, we may not be talking about a viable population. But we also have the Maasai people who live with this wildlife. And so we have a partnership between and wildlife. So that's a big partnership. And when we talk about this partnership, sometimes a lot of landscapes are shared landscapes between communities and wildlife. And a lot of emphasis is put on supporting wildlife conservation, like for example, monitoring, research, handling, a bit of human wildlife conflict, but not which is critical, because the success of our conservation efforts depends on the willingness of these people to support those, not willing or to tolerate wildlife, then it will be meaningless. And of course, at the end of the day, you basically lose those fish. I mean, people who are living with wildlife, interacting with them, and they have been conserving. The reason we are talking about, we have found the Mara, and people have been making decisions about what is happening there and what happens in the Mara. And this is when we talk about conservation, it's not new. We have just given names to things that, and so again, it becomes another critical component of this landscape becomes an eighth wonder of the world. Again, how many pictures? I just want to give illustrations. So this is a community. The reason this I have shown, and there's so many other animals you find there, is basically because of the cultures of these communities. So these communities have cultures that are well linked with nature. Well linked with nature. For example, I will tell you that the Maasai people have those 9 different clans, even all the wildlife species that we have are also divided into those clans. Elephant belongs to a certain clan, a hyena belongs to a certain clan, lion belongs to a certain clan. So they are owned by these communities. And so today, if I went out and a hyena has killed my sheep, if I manage to kill that hyena, tomorrow I find William. If I find William and he comes from that clan, from the hyena, and I'll have to apologize to him that I killed your colleague, I killed your relative, because it meant just the connection between these communities and these people with nature is something that needed to have. They are able to conserve this. They are able to conserve this species. Just giving an example. So, for example, we knew when we were growing up that elephants help the community to get rid of. In Maasai land, when we were growing up, it means that there's something which was very, very rare. It means that so the elephant will be celebrated. But what happened when government now comes and begin to think about policies and list an elephant as one of the species that we need to compensate communities for, for killing. And now a whole bunch of these communities and the aspiration of this community and the relationship of these communities towards this species. And tomorrow you will find a lot of people rallying elephants. I also remember when, let's say, for example, your sheep have been killed, and you're a very lucky man, that tomorrow you will get so many, because it's good luck for you to have a leopard to kill. Now it talks about compensation. So it removes that tolerance, it removes those religions to say that things have changed and communities have different aspirations for to be beaten up properly. So, and the reason there is that connection between the warriors and the Turaco is because warriors mainly is it's a stage that it's like sort of a military to the community, and it's held with very, very high regards. Young people, very energetic and very brave. And these are the people who, even during drought, one of the role that is expected from them by the elders is it doesn't matter how big the drought is, they have to bring back cows, even if it is 10 years, they have to bring back cows alive. So they will drive cows all over and come with them alive, get anything. And this is why I think Professor Larry knows. Anywhere where they find grass, even if it is Nairobi International Airport, they will put cows in there. And then they fight with government. So because this particular age, I mean, there is that really irrational connection between them and livestock. But during good times, what do? They don't have a lot to do. They will find a cool place where they'll go and slaughter a cow and just relax. And those cool places are normally places where there is water. It's very sort of cold. And that's where the Roses turaco, that's the habitat for the Roses turaco. And what the Roses turaco does, because sometimes the cows that they are eating might have been stolen from a ranch, because they steal cows, these guys. So they steal and then they go and slaughter. So then what the Roses turaco will do is it alerts them in case they are enemies. So they become very good friends between them and that particular bird. So when the young boys go kill them, then they will be in trouble um, with the warriors. So basically, I'm just trying to give a bit of few connections between the community and nature, between the community and the environment, that sometimes we forget that there is something that is fundamental and that is still holding that system, and it is values, and it is cultures, and it is the connections of those communities living there with nature. So that's the Masai Mara. ecosystem. The area that I told you is about 0.05% of the country. So the dark green part right there is the National Reserve. That's Masai Mara National Reserve. It's under the government. But I'll tell you, when I went back after my graduation here in Clemson, one of the biggest challenges we had with our policy and government is that our policy, wildlife management policy or law, was so much focused on government protected areas, which are about 52 in the entire country, up to about 8% of the whole country. But only 30% of wildlife are within those government protected areas. I will give you an example of here in the Mara. In the Mara, that particular area, which is undisturbed, which is a government protected area, only hosts about 14% of wildlife in that ecosystem. 86% of wildlife are here. All these other areas. And who is here? It's the communities. So they interact with the communities. And so when I went back, we began a discussion with government to say, I mean, it's meaningless for you to have policies that focus only on 30% of wildlife. Can we think about what we need to do so that 70% of wildlife, which is outside these government protected areas, are taken care of? And so we changed the law, and we have a new Wildlife Act. It's not new, it's now old. It is Wildlife Conservation and Management Act 2013. And that act allowed communities to also begin establishing their own protected areas. So we began community conservation areas, which are what we call conservancies. So these conservancies, what you see in jungle green there, are community conservancies that we have established. The Masai Mara National Reserve is 1,510 square kilometers. But we talked and rallied communities to support establishment of conservancies, and now we have 24 different conservancies, putting an area of 1,625 square kilometers into conservation, which means they put their land under conservation, and that's the reason we are able to have sort of wildlife continue to exist in this particular landscape. But we still have a long way to go. So basically what you see is this whole area in this color is still not covered. We have not been able to establish conservancies there. And this is our aim. This is our primary. We're aiming that in 2030, we have covered this particular thick boundary here. That's our primary focus. But then after that, we'll be moving now to cover this area. So I talked about the wildebeest migration. So originally, we used to have two migration patterns. One that goes south, that crosses the Mara River. But then we had a northern migration that utilized a place called the Loiter Plains up here. The reason this area is highlighted is because this is an information wall. And we want people to be able to understand that these threats are real. We used to have a migration that goes to the Loiter, but it no longer exists. The only migration that exists, and it keeps on becoming smaller, is a migration that goes down to the Serengeti and Ngorongoro. So our aim is to ensure that we can be able to reverse and establish conservancies and reclaim that particular area. It's very, very expensive because this particular area is heavily settled. We have a lot of people who have bought Maasai land, government officials and all that. And so we will be moving slowly as we get the resources, as we push to convince people, so that a lot of things that are happening here, which includes heavy fencing, can begin to open up and we can reclaim that particular area. The other thing I want to mention is out of these 24 conservancies, the ones in jungle green are exclusive areas, and communities have to move, to step aside, live in the periphery, and allow conservancies to be established in their land. But now it's difficult for us to get these areas, the jungle green areas. So we are now establishing what we call conservation areas, not conservancies, because these are conservancies. And the difference is, in a conservancy, they do not allow settlement inside. A conservation area means, which are this one in these brown colors, a conservation area means that it's an area that is, communities live in there, they have their livestock, and they limit infrastructure or any development that hinder free movement of wildlife. So we are beginning to change from where we can establish a closed area, we can, but where we cannot, we establish a conservation area just to make sure that we can open that particular, we can open this whole area for wildlife conservation. How did we do it? So basically, the 24 conservancies we are talking about is a movement of community members. So we began in 2015, where we had about 2,500 landowners, and we built that movement to 17,000 landowners. So now we have 17,000 landowners, people who have subscribed and put their land into conservation. So maybe somebody will have a question to say, but how are these conservancies formed? So basically, originally we used to be a group ranch where all the land is there for the community, but it had a lot of challenges. And one of the challenges was, that group ranches cannot be controlled, and government will just come, cut a piece of it, all that. So we agreed that it is important for us to subdivide and give each person a parcel and give a title deed, and then we agree on what we want to do communally. So the land was subdivided. A standard parcel will be about 150 acres. Then these landowners agree, willingly to amalgamate those pieces and form a conservancy. So you'll find a conservancy with 800 landowners. You'll also find a conservancy of 25 landowners. So that's how it's established. And then they get into business, and I will talk a little bit about that later. So basically it's a movement, getting these communities together and all that. But when we talk about conservancies, so these conservancies have sort of 4 main functions. Number one, it's for purposes of rewilding. And we want to ensure that we can continue to rewild the ecosystem. Before establishment of these conservancies, we had species that completely disappeared, like the wild dogs. But we have begun to see reemergence of these species. So for purposes of rewilding. The second thing is for purposes of economic development in the area. So these conservancies provide a lot of benefit to the communities that I will talk about a bit later. So they're agents of economic development. Again, the other main function for these conservancies is they are also sort of social transformation agents. So I come from a community that has very, very strong cultures, very strong positions on some things. And so when we establish these conservancies, we have 1,000 landowners, we put policies to this conservancy. If there is something that is retrogressive in the culture, we make the communities to drive that change through these conservancies. And I will talk about how those policies are being developed and being implemented in the conservancies. Then the fourth one is it's a political vehicle. It's a political movement. It's an advocacy movement. We are able to influence government because 17,000 landowners tomorrow, and Larry knows, so when we disagree with government, we just block the road and no tourists will go into the National Reserve. 17,000 people say, we need you to establish a policy around this, or we need you to listen to us. We need you to send resources that you're collecting, because you're only collecting resources from 14% of wildlife. The other 70 is with us, and we need to benefit from that National Reserve. And so we get to push government to listen to us, and we get a voice. And of course, also, we we begin to transform things because of that voice that the community has. I will even give you an example that the reason it becomes a political tool is, Professor Larry, you don't know, but the conservancies determine who becomes the governor of Narok, because this movement is very strong. And the reason today, the current governor of Narok County is somebody who comes from the conservancies, because they have to push and lobby for that particular person, that a person who gets in there is somebody who has conservation in heart. And that makes us help us be able to do a number of things. So I come from this organization that is a community-owned and led organization. It was established in 2013. It's now about 10 years old, but it started its operation in around 2016, 2017. And before then, there was a lot of confusion in the Mara, because there were so many NGOs, the WWFs, the Nature Conservancy, the African Wildlife Foundation, where I worked before, and CIs, all those conservation organizations. They are good, but they have not been able to do anything transformational for the so many years they have been there. And you might need to ask yourself why. Basically, it's because people can only be able to change if interventions are focused on, if interventions are emanating from them. If the interventions that are being deployed respect the cultures of these people. If the traditional knowledge is inculcated in solutions that are tried to be developed. So what the CIs, the TNCs, and the WWFs were doing is they copy and paste. If they did something in Congo, they copy and paste that particular model and they bring it to the Mara. It will never work. So the reason we are able to do these transformational changes is because the organization is owned by the community and it is led by the community. And so we will never waste time with a project that we know for sure will not bring any meaningful value or will not be implemented. And so because we understand the cultures and the aspiration of those communities, then our organization, being a grassroots organization and owned by the community, has been able to do so much within a very short time that all these other bingos, big conservation NGOs have not been able to do. And so why is, like, what are we envisioning as an organization? We want to make sure that we can have a vibrant ecosystem that supports life of communities, which is the well-being of those communities, and wildlife. So we have two pillars here. And the reason maybe these other conservation organizations have not been successful is because they sidelined communities and they conserve on behalf of communities. But here, we are putting communities at the center stage, at the driver's seat. So it's the communities who are doing it themselves. And so as you talk about intervention, when you talk about conserving an elephant, you don't say an elephant is good. No, you talk about how that elephant is important to the life of that community and not the life of community being important to an elephant. So people will be able to listen to you and draw interventions that demonstrate that. And then you will be able to build tolerance of these communities when they see that these interventions are community-centered. I can give you an example. Like before this organization was established, poaching was at 40–50%. But for the last 7 years, poaching went down to 0. We have not recorded a single elephant killed as a result of poaching. The only elephants that are being killed, which is about 16–17%, is basically because of human-wildlife conflict. But it's not criminals coming and shooting and selling tusks. The same with the rhinos that we have and lions. And what does that tell you? That this approach that focuses on communities will have transformational impact to wildlife conservation. So we have a number of goals. And one of the goals is to, because these are institutions, conservancies are institutions, they need strong governance. So our organization is mainly focused on building governance for these conservancies. The second one is to influence government to establish policies and frameworks that will be able to support conservation and community livelihood. The third one is coordination. We have 24 conservancies, all within the same landscape, conserving the same lions and elephants, lions traversing these conservancies. And so as an organization, we ensure that there is that communication at the landscape level and coordination at the landscape level, so that there will be no given time that these conservancies began to, to operate like their competitors or all that. But then there was that area that I talked to you about that still needs to be conserved. And so we go out as another goal to establish new conservancies. We work with researchers. We have elephant researchers, lion researchers, people studying wild dogs, people studying wildebeest. So these people give us reports every year to say, these are the critical areas that need urgent intervention. These are hotspots for human-elephant conflict. And then we jump in there, talk to the communities, and establish a conservancy. But the other thing is, this is a system. If we don't think about connectivity of all these, because just like your biologist, just like a system, like a body, you require lungs, needs veins, it needs a brain, needs everything. So because it is a system, we depend on this. We think of corridors like veins that connect, this particular, that connects this particular landscape. Because these species move. A cheetah requires to move in a day about 40 kilometers. So if you don't protect an area that is 40 kilometers square for a cheetah, then it's meaningless for that species. Elephants require 150 kilometers. So if you don't protect that area, then it is meaningless. Elephants eat about 172 species of plants. All those 172 species of plants are distributed across the landscape. So basically, you will lose some important forage for an elephant if you are not looking at a landscape view. There is also genetic gene pool in a landscape where you will make sure that there are viable population. And what are these viable populations? It's a population that biologically, is functional. And so elephants in the Mara needs to be able to move so that there is that free movement of genes, and it can only happen within a bigger landscape for some species. And the same with lions. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges we have now is we have structured the Mara, and it is a safe haven for this wildlife, but it is very, very tiny. When you talk about genetic diversity of these species, they require a bigger landscape. And so if we do not intervene around those other landscapes and ensure that there is connectivity, like for example, Professor Larry, I will, challenge you today when you come, just visit Amboseli. Look at the tusks, the elephants in Amboseli and those ones in the Mara. They are quite different, yet it is almost the same landscape. And because they have been disconnected, you will find that it's now appearing to be like the elephants in the Mara are a whole different species compared to those ones in Amboseli. In Amboseli, you will find tuskers with very long tusks, but ours are elephants with very, very short tusks. And that tells you that there is no interaction between these two meta populations. And basically, that's why corridors become critical. The other thing is we need, for us to convince communities, we must also talk about money. We must talk about dollars. We must talk about benefit and revenue that these conservancies will bring to the communities. And so one of our other goals is to think about how will these conservancies sustain themselves by providing income that goes into supporting community livelihood. Then the other goal is capacity as our organization. We are very few of us. We are about 28 people, about 9 people who are under my division, very few of us, maybe about 4 plus myself, are at a better level to address some of these challenges. The rest are still at the entry level. And basically, we would love to get more people or more hands so that we can support all this critical work. And so we also think about our capacity as an organization. It's also a critical landscape, very, very difficult to work in. Before I came here, when I was coming here, I had to spend about 4 hours just getting stuck and pulling a vehicle, try to pull a colleague from the mud. I also sank. So we had 2 Land Cruisers, all of them engaged in 4-wheel, but we can't come out because the road is so bad. And, it needs expensive, serious cars to traverse that landscape because of the terrain of the area. And that speaks about capacity. But the last goal, and the very important one, is last year, when I talk about 17,000 landowners, when land was being subdivided in Maasai community, what was the qualification? Number one, you have to be a man, 18 years and above. So no woman was given land. So it's only for men because we are a patriarchal society. There is that power imbalance. It's men who make decisions about families and all that, and elders and everything. So women do not own land. So we did a lot of work to support conservancies, but we never realized that we are widening a gender gap because there were no interventions that were focusing on women. And so last year, I had a whole straight 12 months fighting with my board to tell them that this particular goal is important. Otherwise, we will continue to widen that gap. And the other interesting thing is in that particular landscape, 65% of the population are women. So we are focusing on 35% who are the men. And then we shut 65% of our potential. So basically, we began to say we need affirmative action around this area, around interventions that are targeted and focused on women, so that we can bring them closer. We can try to close that gap, but also give them an opportunity, a leadership opportunity for them to make decisions, economic opportunity for them to be able to make money, and basically just the empowerment, and try to work around what are those burdens that stops women or that deny women the opportunity to be able to sit in the same level as men. And so I will talk a little bit again about some of those interventions, but I promise you that what I'm saying is not even 10% of what we do. There is a lot that we do, but because of time, I will just make sure that I talk about the most important things at very, very high level. And I know because I lived here, one of the most important thing here is time. You guys are blessed. We normally say you are blessed with watches for you to monitor your time. And as we are blessed with time, we don't have watches. We just, take care of everything without monitoring time. So you will stop me when I'm beyond your time. So how do these conservancies operate? Basically, I told you for these conservancies to be self-sustaining, we need to think about income that can pay their rangers, and can pay the operation of these conservancies, that can pay, everything, including the board meetings, but also most importantly, that can pay the landowners, because we want, what we have demonstrated is a lion and an elephant can pay for their accommodation, can pay for them to exist anywhere. It can become a land use, and that communities can benefit from them. So what our main income source is tourism. So the 24 conservancies have about 49 tourism facilities. These are high-end facilities. Just like if you go to Rwanda today, just go and Google the gorillas in Rwanda. It's very, very expensive to go to see the gorillas. And basically because of what it entails to sustain those gorillas. So the same with our model, we have 49 conservancies. They are really high-end. And the reason you see a lot of people going into the National Reserve is because the conservancies are expensive. but they are not expensive because of the amount of work that they are doing. So what we have done is professionally we have calculated, having in mind that this is a landscape that have livestock, that has people, that has wildlife, that will have visitors. Then you calculate how many beds can professionally, without destabilizing the system, run this number of acres. So this was determined that for you to have a sustainable sort of ecosystem, you have to operate visitor numbers at this level. So our conservancies, one bed represent 350 acres. One bed represents 350 acres. So if you have a conservancy that is 7,000 acres, so it's only 20 beds that goes in there. So either one camp with 20 beds or 4 camps of 5 beds each. And so basically, it makes it a much more exclusive experience. And if you go there, you will actually find that those areas are properly managed, not like in the National Reserve. The other thing is these particular facilities are very expensive. Not very expensive, but slightly expensive. So you'll find, like for example, a camp called Mahali Mzuri, owned by this big gentleman called Richard Branson. Mahali Mzuri would charge about $3,000 a night. Yeah, it's not expensive. So at 30% occupancy for that particular facility, it meets all the operational costs for the conservancy, plus it meets all the lease income for the conservancy. So most of the facilities, those 49 facilities, are quite high-end facilities because of the experience that it provides. Again, the tourism that we do here is a whole package. So if you go there, it's not, you will actually find an elephant like 300 meters from a Moran, a Maasai warrior herding, or a lion, or a ranger. So it's an interaction of so many things, like generally just the way historically these rangelands were. So how do this model work? Basically, you can actually see that there are huge linkages between all these, and this is what has enabled us to make this a success, that we need a healthy habitat for wildlife, or we need to secure land. But where does that land come from? It comes from those landowners, the Maasai people. So you must talk to them. And what language do they understand? Talk about benefits. And so how do we get those benefits? One of the way is through raising revenue from tourism. And luckily, tourism that we operate in Kenya is 80% wildlife-based. And because we don't have a problem with wildlife, we still have species, then we are able to run successful tourism operation or business. And then, of course, now that wildlife can be able to get habitat. So those are the benefits that these conservancies provide. But if you look at those benefits, you would think that community members would, if you rank them, you would think that they will say lease fees as the first one. No, the first one, when we did our quick survey, is grass banks. Because these conservancies are set aside and they do sort of proper livestock grazing, because these communities they keep livestock, and not few, lots of livestock. So and those livestock can also be a big challenge when it comes to sort of the balance of all those factors in the ecosystem. So they do what we call planned grazing. So they set aside some areas for this particular season, open up others for another particular season. And throughout the year, those livestock are rotated within the landscape. then then the communities will be able to get grass, but there is no disturbance of wildlife, and then the system now starts supporting itself. Of course, there are bursaries and guaranteed revenue, but the other most important one is land protection. So these pastoral communities have been losing land. If you go to northern Kenya today, because we have our colleagues who are also pastoralists up there, they are losing land daily because people are buying off their land, the government is excising subsections of the land and all that. But for us, all these areas that we have been able to put under conservation is protected. Don't quote me, but the other day the president came and he wanted to buy some pristine land next to Richard Branson. But he couldn't because the land is registered. It has a caveat under the Ministry of Land. So he landed with his military helicopter, called a few elders, and elders just told him that there is no way. And he wanted to initiate a process where elders can start decreeing their powers against us who work for that organization. And it's not possible because we were telling the elder, but this is what the law says, that the land has been protected. There is no way he can buy land. And if he wants land, there is still a lot of land that is open there. He can buy there, and then we put into conservancy, but not an area that has been organized. So basically, that's the other big benefit. Maybe I'll also speak about employment. These 24 conservancies are now employing 2,000 individuals. And so that's huge. Like 2,000 people getting jobs just from protecting land. And then, of course, things like consolation schemes and all that. I don't want to bother you with so many of that because it's just highlights from our organization, but I think they're outdated now. A lot have changed since towards the end of last year. And so these are a bit outdated. So what are the challenges? I don't know if I can do that. So every year when this wildebeest comes, this is what we get, like wildebeest, zebras, sort of giraffes hanging on this fence. So there's that bigger section towards the Loita Plains with huge investment around fences. And so these species are not able to go through these fences. So you'll find majority of them, like sometimes they count every single time, and you find maybe I can stop that because doesn't look good. But basically, that's one of our biggest challenges as we speak now. How do we talk to these people who are buying off land and putting up these fences? And these species run into these fences, they get hanged, they get killed. Now it's becoming one of the biggest death traps for these animals. So that's one of the challenges, a huge investment around fencing that is coming up. And Larry knows this because when you use the main road, fences all over. And that used to be a very open area, basically for wildlife. Of course, we have human-wildlife conflict where predators kill livestock. And so these communities, because of their attachment to livestock, go out to pursue these, killers. And of course, you'll find sheep, cows being killed by predators. And so communities now begin to retaliate, either by using spears and all that. But one of our biggest challenges now, again, is that communities who are not organized, who do not have benefit from wildlife, have begun to do that. They poison carnivores to try and eliminate them. But it has a huge ramification, not only to carnivores. Vultures, the same species that I was talking about that plays a critical ecosystem service by cleaning, have disappeared because of poisoning. So these birds are they reproduce very, very slowly compared to other scavengers. They have a long span. They live up to about 30 years. and they lay one egg in 1 year, actually basically in 2 years. So they reproduce very slowly. And the reason that it that they become more susceptible to this is because, number one, they feed in groups. So you'll find 200 birds, 100 birds in one carcass. So assuming that carcass was poisoned, then at one given time, you lose 200, you lose 100 birds. And it is not possible with that rate of decline for this species to bounce back. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. And what does that mean to an ecosystem that requires services for these species? It actually means a lot. We were even talking in the car when we were coming, and I gave an example of these vultures in an ecosystem that, because the ecosystem is not able to service itself because of some of these aspects, like the vultures disappearing. I would give another example of beetles. Beetles play a critical role in fertilizing the ecosystem. But what is happening? Beetles have declined across the world by, I don't know, it's a catastrophic decline. And basically, because of dewormers that we use on our livestock, and because beetles use, to bury cattle poop and all that, we lose those species, just like the vultures, and that has a huge challenge when it comes to ecosystem services. And yeah, I just put that picture in there because these are very, very successful cleaning crew in an ecosystem. If today you ask your friend, Professor Larry, the governor, to send municipality to go and clear 29 million kilos of meat in an ecosystem, he will not have those resources. But these guys are doing it for free. I'll give you an example. A fully grown antelope. These guys clear within 7 minutes, and it is completely clean of any flesh. And we did a study. If you put that same carcass and remove vultures, it takes 3-4 days for hyenas and jackals and all these other scavengers to clear it. What does that mean? If, for example, that carcass harbor any disease, then without these guys who are very, very efficient in terms of cleaning it up, then you will be staring at a health crisis. Of course, again, human-wildlife conflict. So that particular elephant, it's just a few days before I came here, and community members called us to say that there is an elephant that, because these animals are also very, I don't know, what do you say here? They're crazy also. You'll find an elephant that would go into a village and just decide to not allow anybody to get out of that village and stays there. The other day, there was one that went with, but because of scarcity of water, they went into a small plastic tank in a village and they found water. So they dipped and drank water, but they had a little baby. Then that little baby went into a house that was open. So tell me, the matriarch was looking for the baby and they can't find the baby. So they destroyed nearly the whole village, and kids were there opening up iron sheets and roofs and everything, clearing, trying to look for the baby. And so what happens? Then the communities will have to defend themselves. And, they end up spearing or killing the elephant. So sometimes it's not also very easy to live with these species. And so that's another source of human-wildlife conflict. I talked about the women empowerment program that we have. And basically, we wanted to ensure that we can, provide an opportunity or just unlock 60% of our potential by providing opportunities to our women. So one of the things that I mentioned is we utilize these conservancies to transform those social norms. 2 years back, out of 456 community rangers that were employed, none of them was a female ranger. And so because our organization has opportunities to support these conservancies, we use it as a stick and a carrot. That for you to be able to get support from our organization, you must be able to change this. You must employ female rangers. And so far, because we have another sort of department under my portfolio that looks at gender aspects, and the lady right there in the middle is a young Maasai lady. Her name is Angela. She was actually the other day appointed, and she joined, the program called IVLP by the United States Department of, I don't know, Interior or what. And they were here to try and study how approaches that can be used to transform social norms and all that. So they have been able to push a lot of challenges, a lot of things to try and involve women. And one of them is through ensuring that women get employment. Secondly, is to form, affirmative actions that will support women to be part of decision making. So all these 24 conservancies, we pushed them to have women representation. When we came in, the 17,000 landowners were defined by the constitution of these conservancies as landowners because of the title deed. So we the other day intervened and changed the constitution of all these conservancies to define landowners not only by title, but also by, accepting that you can be a landowner by being a spouse of a title holder. So that definition also came in, and it gave the women the opportunity to sit in the boards of the conservancies, gave women an opportunity to push for their rights. And we also do, so out of the 24 conservancies, we also have the 25th conservancy, which is the Masai Mara Wildlife Conservancy's Women Forum. These are 30,000 spouses of the landowners. We bring them together, we provide targeted trainings, we provide economic opportunities for them, we give them a voice in the conservancies, and so they are doing a lot of transformational things. But also, same thing I talked about, sort of passing these policies through these conservancies and transforming communities utilizing conservancies as vehicles for transformation. So child protection policy, we have a challenge because our girls are dropping out of school. Early marriages, FGM are still practiced. And so we make sure that these conservancies sign or ratify these policies to protect children. And so many, many other things. Of course, we also have livelihood aspects where we try and support communities to build a livelihood base. Change, there are so many small livestock or cows, transform them into better breeds and reduce their numbers. Education is another big thing that we work around. So out of those 2,000 people that are, out of those 2,000 people who basically are employed, only about 30% come from that area. And we did a quick study to understand why are they not accessing opportunities. And it was basically because they lack skills that the market needs. Most of the people are trained around hospitality, guiding, and all that. But there are huge opportunities. Like, for example, we noted that most of the people who are employed there either are plumbers, electricians, mechanics, and all that. So we ended up supporting building of a community college that provide those targeted trainings to Maasai youth so that they can be able to get that opportunity. So I want to stop there, but before I stop, I want to say thank you, Professor Larry. We came here, about 4 of us from Maasailand, because of the partnership between Clemson and Maasailand. And when we came here, the 4 of us, this college is now run by an alumni of Clemson University. I lead that other whole organization that is doing all that work. My other 2 colleagues work for the university, Masai Mara University. And one of them is a deputy vice chancellor in charge of education or administration. Then the other one is a big professor at that same university. So basically, Clemson has actually provided a hand in all what we have been able to do. And thank you so much. And sorry for taking too much of your time. I don't know whether there are any questions.
Observing the migration from whatever perspective you want to speak to it. Why is the migration of the wildebeest from the Serengeti up to the Masai Mara, why is that so significant, and why is that a global concern?
Yeah, so basically, the migration is it's drawing a lot of it's drawing global concerns, because I mentioned to you that we have nearly about 1.5 animals migrating at every given time. It's a phenomenon, it's an ecological phenomenon that sustains that particular ecosystem. And we have so many challenges that are affecting it. Number one is human, human practices. Like, for example, the fences that are coming up that blocks them, settlement, population growth is another big challenge. In that particular landscape, in the Mara, we have an annual population growth rate of 10%, 8% reproduction, and 2% immigration. So if you are talking about opening up space and people are growing at that, the population is growing at that level, then it gives much more challenge for you to be able to achieve any conservation success in that particular area. So human activities like the fencing and encroachment, the population growth, but the other big challenge is sort of policies or frameworks, because this migration happened in two different jurisdictions, Kenya and Tanzania. Kenya has a whole different policy in managing wildlife. The same with Tanzania. Sometimes they really contradict. Tanzania practice hunting. We don't do hunting. We outlaw hunting in our country. And so most of these species, like for example, elephant, we protect them. But when they cross over to Tanzania, then they go into hunting blocks and they get, killed. Also, unnecessary competition between these governments. One of the other challenges is sometimes, Tanzania can be deliberate to stop wildebeest from coming, and they ban a whole stretch that the wildebeest, when they are coming, they find that to be really, really difficult for them to cross, because an area that would take them 2 or 3 days to cross, no grass. And so these species cannot survive. They'll just go for several hours without grass, and they think about going back. And the reason is for them to keep more wildebeest on the other side. It's a stupid thing, but sometimes it's human, and they sometimes just decide to act silly. And so those are some of the things, like those political aspects and all that. But there is hope. There is hope because governments have begun conversations. There is hope because communities have agreed, and they have seen, and they have demonstrated that they can provide that habitat for wildebeest migration. And that's why we were talking about the organization, which is a community organization, is talking about reclaiming back that original northern migration of wildebeest. So it's not easy, but there is hope because of the few small hopeful steps that we are making, that we will be able to see a bit of reverse on what is happening in terms of wildebeest, migration challenge. Any other question? Yes. I think I know you. Yeah. So good to see you again.
It's been a while.
Yep.
Hi, Eric. Thank you. What a great presentation. I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about the fencing. I
Right.
think that probably brings many different landowners and, it seems like a real messy challenge. So if you could talk a little bit more about some of what you all are doing to find
Yeah.
approaches to the fencing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so fencing is one of the biggest challenges because of habitat fragmentation and blocking wildlife corridors and all that. So what is happening is people buy land and then they fence off that land. And when they fence off that land, then they do it for purposes of maybe securing grass for their livestock, or maybe they are not part of the conservancies and therefore they just become deliberate to stop wildlife from utilizing their land. So it's one of the biggest challenges. But what are we doing in terms of trying to bring down those fences? And I told you, we are only talking about less than 20% of what we do. We have a defensing program, working with communities to defense the areas. So like those areas that are critical for wildlife, we deploy resources, we deploy negotiations, we deploy our own time to work with those communities and provide them with sort of compensation for those fences that are up so that they can be able to remove the fences. So we have a defensing program. It's a whole other program that we do, and we have been able to open quite a big area through that defensing program. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but it's a lot that goes into this fencing. People trying to protect grass for their livestock. People say, buying land and they just want to mark the territory of their land and then they fence and people just not being, not willing to be part of a conservancy and they fence off their land. And so it is something that is instigated by so many things. Dr. Baldwin was part of my graduate committee, so thank you so much for coming. Good.